Hi guys, so yeah, talking about revenue, profit, a bit on price sensitivity and all the rest of it. So clear things, some key definitions that you need to be clear of. Price, the amount of goods, money required to purchase a good or service. You can see here sales revenue says money received by business over a period of time. The actual way you'll define this in the exams you'll do, as it says here, price times quantity sold. All right, so it's the price that the business sets it at times by the quantity sold. And the important bit is how that price impacts demand, okay, for this part of the course. So demand is the quantity of good or service desired by the market at any given price, okay, at a given period of time. All right, so the exact definition for you guys is the quantity of good or service customer would like to buy at a given price at a time period, okay? So that's the Excel. Now, profit, it needs to be clear, is very different to revenue, and you need to be completely 100% this. Revenue is just your selling price times by unit sold. Profit is revenue minus or less in accounting terms costs. Yeah. So as we can see here, you've got sales revenue, you've got costs, you've got profit. Okay. And there's some calculations there you can have a little look at. I've also stuck in for you, and this is more Unit 1 to be honest with you, but it does help you for Unit 5 as well. There's a little revision presentation here that you can go through, some revision questions you can go through about fixed and variable costs and all the rest of it. And there's also a PowerPoint here on calculating and interpreting profit. Just a word of warning, although this is very good, it talks about profit. There's a few slides in there that aren't necessarily as relevant to you guys as they could be. So this particular slide, absolute relative, ways in which you don't need to know that. You do not need to know that, so ignore that part of the slide. The profit choice is quite good actually. It shows, it helps us when we come later on to stakeholder perspectives. And the fact that the business might think about paying dividends, which will help obviously shareholders paying dividends, yeah, or increase the level of drawings. So money, drawings is money taken out of the business by the owner, or reinvesting profit into the business, into new machinery. So that could help your suppliers, technology, maybe employ more staff, increase wages, new locations, more stock. You know, all the different things that you have. There's good profits and the trade-offs around that. But that's for another lesson. Okay. Now, price sensitivity is defined as where changing the price of a product by a certain amount leads to a smaller change in demand. So, okay, so when you're doing a revision for price sensitivity and insensitivity, the proper economic terms, what we talk about in economics, especially at A-level, is about price elastic and inelastic products. And we talked about this in Unit 1 briefly. But essentially, we're talking about price elasticity demand when we're talking about sensitive and insensitive products. So if something's price elastic, that means it's price sensitive. So it's got sensitive, so it's got price sensitivity. All right. So if there's a change, the change in quantity demand is greater than the change in price. Now, don't get overly worked up about this. Okay. You don't need to know these definitions. You need to know the definitions of price and sensitivity, and just understand that when a product is sensitive to a change in price, it means that it will change rapidly. Okay. So if you lower the price, there'll be a large increase in demand. If you raise the price, there'll be a large decrease in demand. So basically what they're saying is if you increase the price, yeah, you can actually decrease revenue because you'll sell less units because people will demand less. Okay? Just as if it's insensitive, yeah, if it's price insensitive, all we're saying, okay, is that if you increase the price of a price insensitive product, yeah, people are less likely, okay, to buy an alternative, and therefore actually your revenue can increase. So if I give you an example, if in Dubai, and this is a necessity good, so in Dubai, if they doubled the price of fuel, yeah, so they put a tax on fuel or something like that, to try and reduce negative externalities, or there's some sort of push to try and get everyone a bit more eco-friendly. If they double the price of fuel, I would still need to buy fuel. Okay, it's a necessity for me. I've got no alternative. All right. So that is relatively price insensitive. So if the buyer doubled the price of fuel, I would still have to buy it, in the short term at least, as much fuel as I'm using. As a result of that, revenue for Dubai would increase because they've increased the price and they're selling reasonably the same number of units, okay, of fuel, and therefore the revenue would go up. Now, if it was something different, okay, let's say McDonald's increased the price of its cheeseburgers. All right, now there might be some controversy to this, but if McDonald's doubled the price of its cheeseburgers, yeah, we could argue that that's pretty price sensitive because there's substitutes for that product. Okay, so what might happen is that people start buying Burger King cheeseburgers instead. Okay, because there's a viable alternative there or substitute for that particular product. Okay, and we see these things here. So price elastic goods. Okay, so price sensitive goods are usually there's lots of substitutes for them. They can be luxury products. Okay, because you can basically you don't need them, perhaps. Right now, there's controversy there because you could argue that some luxury goods are actually relatively inelastic in when it comes to price because they're of such a high value anyway that the market they're targeting, the high-end income customers, might still demand them anyway. So there's controversy around that. Okay, so you can argue that both ways. Where there's little loyalty to the product or particularly expensive, is what they're saying. So price elastic. Don't particularly agree with that, but you get what I'm saying. So in the actual book, when it's talking about price elastic goods, they're talking about things that have got a large number of substitutes as well, etc., etc. And that's what you need to stick to. Price elastic, there's few substitutes. It's necessity or it's addictive. So cigarettes, for example, addictive. There's strong brand loyalty associated. So you might have people who are very loyal to McDonald's. So they would still, in their instance, again, it depends, all right, might find that there's relatively low price elasticity in that. And again, usually not too expensive. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the inexpensive idea because some products, if they're quite low price, they're low quality, and therefore there's many substitutes for them in that sort of area. So it depends. So you can see here, you don't increase the price, business to collect less revenue, yeah, okay, with price elasticity. So if you've got an elastic or sensitive, price-sensitive product, you don't want to increase the price too much because people will collect less revenue, fall in demand without any extra price increases. So you might be asked in the exam, they might give you some figures, and you can determine whether or not it's sensitive or insensitive. Because if it's sensitive and you increase the price, revenue should go down. If it's insensitive and you increase the price, okay, revenue will go up. Okay? Okay, so this is the June 2012 question paper. It's looking at gas prices. Now, gas is price sensitivity. Now, they tell you that it's price insensitive, but we know that gas is probably insensitive because it's a non-renewable resource. There's no substitute for it within households that have gas, electric ovens or whatnot filtered in the short period of time that we've got. In the long term, people might switch to electric if gas increases. This is especially relevant given the potential increases in the price of gas with the problems with Russia at the moment. But essentially, we're told gas is price insensitive. So this means that when price increases, yeah, revenue will increase. All right? So you need to be clear. Now, if they say profit increases or revenue increases, they're trying to trick you. When we're talking about price sensitivity, we're always talking about revenue. Okay? Because just because we've got an inelastic product or a price insensitive product and we're raising prices, yes, it will increase revenue, but we don't know whether it increases profit. Now, if you're given an option between profit and costs, you go for profit because it's more obvious, but you always go for revenue wherever cost is. And we don't know about the costs because we're not talking about the costs, we're talking about revenue, right? So revenue will increase, yeah? Now, one reason why demand for gas is price insensitive. Now, if we look at the mark scheme for this one, you'll probably have ideas of your own. So, number of substitutes available, closeness of substitutes available. So closeness means how easily can you switch to electricity, for example. Yes, that's a close. It's not really substitute you can move to. Yeah. Advertising. Okay. So you could have talked about how advertising, high levels of advertising for gas prices from British Gas has led to it being relatively insensitive. How loyal customers are. Yeah. So customer loyalty between British Gas and other firms in the marketplace might have affected this. So yeah, I mean, we're talking about British Gas branding, so people might trust the British Gas brand over others. And necessity, obviously, it's a necessity product, so you could have expanded on that. Okay. So the example they give, because gas is no substitute, consumers cannot change when the price of gas changes. All right. If you were asked to evaluate it, you could have talked about how they could have switched to an alternative provider, but then most of the gas prices go up at the same time. So that's the big thing. The fact is, there's not much competition in the gas industry within the UK, which is another problem to monopoly power. You've got large gas companies, which, because there's few substitutes, there's a lack of choice. There's a lot of power within those companies. It means that you have prices that are maybe a little bit more inflated than if there was more competition. So the lack of competition also makes it slightly more insensitive, because you can't switch to a viable competitor, and there's less reason for British Gas to be more competitive. All right, so that's a little bit more for that. Okay. Now, the next question on this paper was a likely effect on the customers' British Gas price increase. Now, you could have they could have asked you about the effect on revenue, and you could have evaluated that. But if we just look at what they're saying to this, it's not necessarily relevant to the sensitive argument. But less disposable income, one possible effect that you then expand on. You might have to pay more for gas and electricity, energy. What you could have said is move to substitute energy sources. So we could have moved to electricity. Okay, we could have moved to a competitor instead. So the way they did it, people on low incomes will spend more on gas, which will lead to less disposable income and will lead to a lower standard of living. So remember, identify the issue and then expand with 2 clear points as a result of that. Say what the effect is. All right. So 2 linked strands that build the explanation. So again, just looking at the examiner's report, one reason why the demand for gas is price insensitive is a necessity for many people, so the demand should not fall even if the prices are increased. So that gets 2 marks. This one only gets 1 mark. Okay, and they've identified a reason for the development as to why it's a necessity. Okay, so gas is a necessity to people to cook food in business at production time. The business will have to pay the price of gas to make sure the business remains productive. So they're saying why it's a necessity. They're not saying why it means that it's price insensitive. Okay, so that's the key thing. You're not talking about necessity. You're talking about why it's price insensitive. Okay, so just in summary, remember the difference between price and revenue. Remember that the number of substitutes, the amount of competition, the availability of viable alternatives or close substitutes will affect whether it's price sensitive or price insensitive. One additional issue you could think about would be the fact that perhaps it depends upon the economic situation. All right, so if you're in recession, that means people's incomes are lower, therefore they might be more sensitive to price changes as a result of that. So it's not just internal issues or external issues. There's lots of other things that can affect the sensitivity towards price changes. So yeah, I hope that's very helpful.